Hi, I'm Neesha. I'm a social worker, a mediator and an ally for the LGBT community. I'm here today to welcome you to the Transgender podcast series. Throughout the years of work, I've witnessed people struggle with their mental health and addiction and believe that it's a lack of education and knowledge which contributes to a limited understanding and insight into transgender. I've heard accounts of trauma and abuse, along with many stories of resilience and courage. I've met amazing people along the way who have inspired me to produce this 5-episode series. You'll hear insightful interviews, discussions and personal stories. It aims to foster understanding and support.
I was in a very small community, and the one thing I did notice, especially with males that you used to chat with, is it reduces down to a very polite hello. They don't ignore you completely. It's just a very polite dismissal. People you used to chat with, and suddenly you were untouchable. I was in aviation. I was an Air Force pilot. And so I basically hid in the cockpit. It also means I really didn't face the world, which eventually led to a breakdown.
Yeah, I actually moved 5 years ago from a Bayside suburb, which was quite metropolitan, and I moved to a rural community to actually escape transphobic attacks. So my wife and I were being physically attacked by our neighbours, so we had to move away. And moving away, I did lose community that I had and access to a lot of support services. And yet I found moving to a rural community where we are, my wife's binary trans, we are outright the only queer people in town, was a shock to town. Yet the discrimination that we deal with it's not to my face and it's not violent. So it's not great. We're kind of tolerated. Yet for us, we're actually safe now. But of course, I've lost my community. So it's quite hard to weigh that up.
In her first school that she went to, she was still known to everybody as her previous name. So that was tricky. And we ended up moving her for a fresh start to a new school, which has been mostly positive, but still extremely isolating. She talks about the first day that she went to her new school, and it was the first time in her whole life that she was just known as Alice, not a transgender person, just a 16-year-old teenage girl. And that lasted for a day, because then she was known as the trans girl from,
rural communities where they're very close, that the rumour mill actually works a lot stronger in those communities than what it would do in a metropolitan area.
What is it that you think would be really important for people to know?
Gosh, there's so much, but it really comes down to education, and that entails Alice putting herself out there and us putting ourselves out there, and that's really hard. I'm a grown-up and I can do it, and I find it really hard. So as a child or a teenager, to have to be that advocate for a community is really, really stressful and really, really tiring. She is tired, and she every day has to defend who she is.
They employed an independent contractor which specialised in LGBTIQA plus education. That was a real positive. Definitely the training, the education, where all the staff or students or whatever the situation might be have got an opportunity to ask questions of a facilitator. The other thing that was really important was that it be supported by the top person, the regional director or the headmaster, or the communication has got to come from those people right at the top.
So the leadership's really important.
The leadership, yeah.
Those leaders within the schools and the organisations are also quite often the leaders or champions within their communities. So when they do stand up for things like that, you see a real shift within the community, because they're not only standing up for their students or the people within their workplace, but they're also standing up for their general community, and people will start to listen. We were very lucky that she transitioned socially at quite a young age in kindergarten. And so it was, she's just gone into school as herself, completely authentically, and being embraced as herself, and nobody knows who that she was assigned male at birth. They have no idea apart from the teachers. And so we're very lucky. And I think that there are also quite a few people who don't know that I'm queer still, and we don't put it out there. I don't feel like it's safe.
Unfortunately, you sort of do sometimes end up being in the position where you're advocating for your own existence.
Topic amongst some of my friends about whether you're trans enough or whether you can use that label, whether that label fits.
If you don't associate with what you were assigned at birth, then yeah, you're pretty much under the trans umbrella, whether that be non-binary, non-conforming. You don't have to go under every label that there is as well. There is just flexibility. Just be who you are. From
a very young age, I just thought I was female. I didn't even think there was any question about it, because there was no information about trans around whatsoever. I don't sort of like the word trans, because you don't transition. I consider I was always female, so all I did was stop pretending to be what I wasn't.
I had to figure out a lot of things before I even started trying to medically transition, and the biggest thing is figuring out the safest way to go about it, because some medical professionals mightn't be as informed or as inviting on the idea. Well, it's hard to get into the medical terms for genitalia and reproductive stuff. It's hard to get into those terms in a way that feels honest to myself, but it's also easily conveyed to a medical professional.
My dysphoria is around my chest. I got so much gatekeeping, but no, I don't want them to look a certain way. I just want them gone. I'm like, you don't understand. This is due to my gender. Oh, so you want to go on hormones? No, I want to go straight for surgery. Oh, no, we can't do that. No, well, actually, I know you can do that. So I had to do a lot of research, travel a long way to find someone who was back then open to do a chest reduction on someone who identified as genderqueer. And I just thought, oh, this is my body. This really shouldn't be this hard. And, even when I'd had it done and I had the checkup afterwards, it was, well, we could improve them to look a certain. I'm like, you're not getting it. All I care about is they're gone.
And it's exhausting as well. I've had to advocate very heavily for myself throughout this whole process. And you really look at these medical professionals and go, you guys are the professionals. Why am I having to educate you? On top of everything else, this is difficult enough.
A lot of which don't even know about informed consent and the informed consent model of care to be able to make our own decisions about our own bodies.
I would already been 1 year on testosterone, and I didn't have enough until my next endocrinologist appointment. And I went and I was like, can I get a script? And he went, no, you can't have it because you don't have erectile dysfunction. Another one I've had, I went to a doctor and they were like, oh, which arm? Which clearly it doesn't go on the arm, it goes in the backside. So it's as soon as I heard that, I went, oh God. It's it doesn't go on the arm.
I've done every single quiz and test and everything from BuzzFeed to medical journals, figuring out who I am, what I want. But, oh, no, you might regret it.
The statistics show that less than 0.5% of transgender people who've gone through gender affirmation surgery regret it.
And I'd also like to throw in the mix there how many people in that very small pool regret it because of the stigma and the pressures from external society putting on them after they've transitioned. So if they didn't have all that negative energy being put on them from transphobic and harmful attitudes, then perhaps that number wouldn't even exist.
I've heard statistics coming out of America from parents with trans kids, when parents and family members aren't supportive, the statistics of self-harm, suicide and suicidal ideation, they're like in the high 70s and 80s. But when the parents and like the village is there to support their young trans youth, that statistic drops down to like 5%. That's the power of a parent's love right there.
You can't make them not trans. You might postpone their transition, and like some of us who are older, we can go, then, they might end up losing their career or losing their children or losing their relationship because they've had to come out later in life. And like Robbie mentioned, go through multiple breakdowns, or you can just support them and encourage them to be who they already are. That's suicide prevention.
The one thing I found with hormones, my mind accepted my body a lot better. And that I didn't feel more female. I felt that my body was matching what my brain thought I should have.
The amount of GPs that are willing to take this sort of stuff on is pretty light. I've ended up having to travel to Melbourne, but just recognising that not everybody has that level of resources and privilege to be able to do that.
I had to go to Melbourne as well, as you said, Mick. So it was a very long process. So I think I kind of sort of realized who I was back in 2019, but then it was sort of finding that help, that medical expertise. And shout out to Reddit. That's how I found Dr. Peggy Wong at RMIT Hub. So shout out to Dr. Peggy, because she's amazing. She sort of got me access to testosterone through the informed consent model. She's extremely knowledgeable and so kind, and it's so important. And as you said, Zara, just the sort of quieting that happens in your mind, like there's just utter chaos when the dysphoria takes over, and then when you finally have access to what you need, there is almost a sort of peace that comes over you and far less noise, and it actually allows you to focus on important things in life, like connections and finding the joy. So there are no words to really describe the benefits of that.
It was a heavy emphasis on figuring out how to come out socially in this town and figuring out who is safe to have these safe conversations with. My boss, when I was saying, hey, refer to me this way and not that way, he was very poignantly, can I call you champ? Yep. Can I call you legend? Yep. Can I call you dickhead? Yep. Great. That's all I need to know.
If you do get it wrong, which you will, because we're all human and we get things wrong all the time, don't make it about yourself. It's not about you, So the more that you do that, you're so right. It draws attention to the fact that they're making such a big deal out of it. It singles you out so much more, and then it becomes really embarrassing.
It's like the common one you always hear. It's like, oh, but I've been doing it my whole life. You have to forgive me. And it's like, you could just say sorry and move on. You don't have to be like, try and make a joke out of it or something.
Yeah, it just makes it awkward.
We need, the reason why we get onto hormones and surgeries is a part of the medical process, because so we can physically feel okay in our bodies. It's a medical condition. I did not choose this. This, the way you're treating me is so unfair, because I didn't choose this. I shouldn't have to go through this.
I think the hardest part about any of the, especially with the hysterectomy part, is the fact of there's no information about the transitioning side, where if you get a hysterectomy, what happens with the testosterone, what happens with the hormone levels. There's not too much information about the trans side of things. And it's the reason I had to go 3 times was because the first person was like, I can give you information about hysterectomies, but I can't give you anything about for it being transitioning or for anything on that sense.
When Alice first came to us, we were like, well, we love you very much, but you'll have to do that when you're 18.
Yeah.
We just had no idea.
Yeah.
And we thought we were being very loving and accepting. And Alice said to me, well, I can't wait till I'm 18. I won't be here. And that was enough for, okay. So we had to then educate ourselves. And at that stage, Alice was sort of the last stages of being able to pause puberty. So we needed to get onto it urgently. So thankfully we did.
One of the most important things to somebody who is trans or gender diverse is a sense of community. The experience is really, really isolating at first, because you you start to feel like there's something wrong with me, there's something broken. So I think being a safe space for that person to start to access a sense of community around them, to even help them out with that in some ways, some small ways that they ask for, then that I think is one of the most important things you can do.
The fear about coming out is that you're going to lose people who you care about. And so losing family is really, really difficult. And I think when that happens, that the best thing you can do is surround yourself with community that become your family. So we talk a lot in this space about chosen family. I've experienced that unconditional love that I didn't get with my biological family. And so it's just such an amazing thing to be able to surround myself and my children with.
So I was very nervous about that from a traditional Catholic family. I wasn't sure how they were going to take it, but my beautiful father said, "Oh, don't worry, I don't have to understand it. I've just got to love her."
Can I actually just challenge that a little bit? Because my experience was similar to that. My parents, when I came out to them, said, doesn't matter. We love you no matter what you decide, whatever you choose. We love you either way. But what happened for me was that I realized that their acceptance wasn't actually enough. What I needed from my parents was for them to actually be active in supporting me. Yeah, absolutely.
Bookend that comment from my father, who goes to men's shed every week and with all these older men. And one of the older men said, "Oh, I hear your grandson likes to wear dresses." I don't think Alice has actually heard this story. And he said, "What'd you say?" To the 73-year-old man. "Oh, it's fine. We don't mind those type of people." And Dad said, "It's not those type of people. She's my beautiful granddaughter. And if you say that again, we'll take it outside."
Oh, gosh.
So I think what you're saying is very true. It's all very well to say, "I love you," no matter what, but you've got to say it. And I know with my mum, who is the conservative Catholic, she put a post when it was all happening with, one of the many things in the media, and she put a post on her Facebook page, and she posts about everything. She put a post about this saying how important it was to support our transgender community. So action.
Absolutely.
Words
Not so much
actions.
violent action.
No.
But yes.
Alice, no hitting. Kia.
I think it's also really important to meet them where they're at when they're in, regardless of where they are in their journey as well.
Yeah.
Speaking from that religious upbringing background as well, it's not something that's overly spoken about within that religious community before it actually happens. And sometimes it's met with quite a lot of backlash where you probably don't expect the backlash to come from. Ask them how you can provide the support if you don't know how to, and sort of just go from there step by step, but making sure to actually even just check in and go, what can I do to support you? How can I support you? And actually go from there.
Challenging stereotypes and ideas about trans people the narrative we have about trans people in our own heads, because that in turn, because narratives in our heads, beliefs, impact our actions and how we sort of navigate the world and how we interact with other people. One example is not asking trans people personal questions just because they're trans. We don't go up to cisgender people and ask about their medical history, but for some reason people think it's okay to ask trans people that.
In the queer space in general, people are shouldn't have to educate you. It's actually really hard because it's emotional. They're advocating for themselves, and it's really, really hard. So to take that burden off them and to make things a bit easier for them, you can go to reliable resources and you can find out information for yourself, and then you can educate yourself, and that means so much.
It doesn't necessarily get easier, but it's more that the people they start getting stronger, more resilient. When I started to support my sibling a bit more, it came around because they were essentially being told by their peers, and I will preface this with a trigger warning, but they were essentially being told to go kill themselves by age peers. So a lot of where my support came from was because I didn't want them to, and I'm scared about it every day, that something like that may happen because somebody says it at the wrong time and they're just not in the mental state where they can kind of reflect it back and go, that's not who I am, kind of thing.
This is just in our case at the moment with being a teenager. It's really, really horrible being a teenager anyway. But then being a trans teenager on top of that, the risk is just so high.
The way trans people have been treated in the past has echoes, and those echoes can turn up in ourselves as well as allies and as trans people. And so I know that a lot of folks around me who were trying to be supportive were really worried for me. But if that's our entire focus, instead of the joyful part of it, of actually finding yourself, realizing yourself as a fully formed human in the world as you actually are, and how worth it that is, I think if that's something that you can get across, that is really important.
That is so true.
Yeah.
Only the other day, Alice said, but you're punishing me for being trans because I wouldn't let her go to a party because I was worried.
The lens should be focused on the people perpetrating violence against anybody else, whether they're trans or any person, and we need to focus on changing those behaviours rather than restricting ourselves from being beautiful, healthy people.
I think the hardest thing really for me was coming out to myself, which occurs before you come out to friends or family or anything like that.
When I was starting to go through a tiny bit of male puberty, I was like really depressed because I was like, this doesn't feel right. And I wanted to transition, but I also had this really bad gut feeling that if I transitioned, I'd just be known as the trans person. But I just wanted to be a girl, and that was it, not be a trans girl. Yeah, so telling my mum, I was crying obviously because I just didn't know what would happen. But yeah, that's the grief that I kind of had coming out as trans. Yeah.
It's a very unique experience for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I think I did a lot of grieving because I felt in myself that I discovered it too late, that I'd sort of ignored all of these signs. Like the way that I describe it to people is that I had a puzzle piece here and a puzzle piece there. And just with the puzzle piece on its own, it didn't make sense. But then once I had all the pieces together, it was like, oh, that this is what it is. And just grieving the loss of time, and it's a big thing.
Before I transitioned, I was an engineer, and after I transitioned, I was a female engineer. And there was an unwritten rule somewhere, I think, that female engineers know less than male engineers, because I really noticed the change in the way I was treated. And it may have even been that it was because I was a trans female engineer that I was treated, or I just felt like I lost respect overnight.
Yeah, it is hard to know, isn't it? What reactions we're getting from people are related to our trans experience or related to gender.
I actually, at work, I wasn't like, oh, I'm this. I put a TikTok out and put it on my Facebook, and then when whoever knows. And I was like, if they come up to me, if they do whatever, I'll for the first week or so, I was like, that's fine. But the first time I came into my next shift, it was straight to the right name, straight to right pronouns. And then my workmates would actually commonly correct other people as well. I didn't have to my work was pretty good with that.
One part of my brain knew that I'm trans. The other part of my brain was in denial. It was just this constant internal war. My subconscious you're trans, come out. And the other part of my brain is just I'm not trans. It was just constant war for years until it just hit breaking point, and I'm just I have to come out to myself. Otherwise, I'm going to keep feeling miserable. I can't keep running away from it. It's been 4 years since I came out, so I've had a lot of time to do all the social stuff, medical stuff. So I'm at peace with myself now, and I don't often think about the fact that I'm trans. I just live my life.
A lot of it has been coming out to myself and trying something and going, does that actually work? Is that something that brings me a little bit more joy? Do I feel more like myself? Oh, yes, I do. That one didn't really work. Okay, that was worth a crack. I'll try the next thing. It's this uniquely complex thing of it's wonderful because I've got an entire landscape of gender to play in, but also it's terrifying because I've got an entire landscape of gender to play in, and I don't have this here is what a woman is as defined by society and so on, and here's the bits that I want to take away from that. It's more there's something in there somewhere that is pretty close to what I want to be, and I have no idea what that is as yet.
When I first started transitioning, I was hyperfem. Like I needed to prove myself to myself and to people around me that I was female. Like this is who I am. I've realized this about myself. Now I need to prove it. And so I had to be like super hyperfem. And then over time, as I've started to settle into myself and I've built a circle of friends that are supportive of me no matter what. So now I'm free to go, well, you know what? What is it that I really like about this? And what's part of that masculinity that I enjoyed, and what's the bit that I want to reject, and what bits of femininity do I enjoy, and what do I reject about that notion around femininity as well. So do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, with me, like I feel like every day I try to make myself look pretty and good, like just to, just so I can fit the stereotype of what a woman is, not, the stereotype. I'm not saying it, but, like even going to school every day, I'm trying to prove to people, unfortunately, it's just in my brain. I have to prove to people that I'm a girl and that this is like when you call me a boy or when you are transphobic, like you actually, I'm trying to make them look stupid because
right.
You know what I mean? Like, but it's, I don't know. Like I always try to prove my femininity to people, unfortunately, like speaking with naturally my voice is at this level, but then I think when I hear my voice, I'm like, oh, maybe it should be higher. Maybe it should be this, maybe, and it's just that. But then when you realize that actually none of that has anything to do with what being a woman is. It's like, oh, okay. But still it's that, just where we are and where we're surrounded by that we have to fit into these certain roles,
And should we have to? Like, I, as part of my transition, my voice was one of the things that really caused me a bit of dysphoria. Yeah. But I realized that dysphoria was around people misgendering me. It wasn't about my voice. I didn't need to change my voice. I actually don't mind my voice.
And that's the same thing with
I didn't want to be misgendered.
Yeah, and that's the same thing with like surgeries even too. Some people do surgeries not for themselves, but they're doing it so then they can please everyone else around them. Like for me, I need surgeries, but for some other trans women, they don't.
And it should be perfectly okay to present however you want, but I think it is that internalized transphobia that you put on yourself. I don't want people looking at me weird, I just want to go to the supermarket, or I just want to go and do what I want to do without having to worry about, oh, I'm trans, what are people going to think of me? I don't want somebody coming up to me and saying a horrible thing or...
Look, I'd love to be able to say, I went straight to stud muffin, but,
You're there.
Well, thank you. Thanks, Jazz. Thanks.
What are you doing after the show?
We'll talk. But it's just that self-consciousness of, how people perceive you. Yeah. And it's just, It holds you back in a lot of ways.
I more lean towards the non-binary than the full one side, but especially being in rural, it's just a lot easier to just be like, if I ever introduced myself to most people, I would go he, him. I wouldn't even put the they, them, because it's so much harder to try and do that. And it's like, there's sometimes where I'm like, what if I want to wear like shorter shorts because it's boiling hot, but it's like, no, males have to wear the shorts up to their knees. Or it's like I want to wear like a crop type top. No, men have to wear the full shirts. Majority of it is you're trying to do it for other people, which isn't what you should do. But it's society is just like, no, this is for that, this is for that.
It's funny because that's what we've been doing all this time is conforming to what other people want. And now we transition and we're conforming to what other people want.
I've been on the puberty blockers, I've been on the estrogen. It didn't stop any of it. I just naturally am supposed to be 6 foot, and that's okay. I've accepted that. But what's helped me also is seeing that there's cis women that have similar.
I love seeing cis women that are tall and it's like, oh, I'm shorter than you.
No, it's just not, or even any other considered masculine attributes to people. Like when women have, cis women have deeper voices, it makes you kind of feel better. Like, oh, there are other women out there. Yeah. That's like with me being tall, like I'll just look at the supermodels and be like, it's fine.
So there is, model. There is a lot of work. Oh God, being transgender is such hard work. It's like, you need a running sheet to keep track of where you're up to, because, there's hair removal, you've got to learn makeup, and then there's clothes, need to make sure that they fit properly to your hair. And I think, you know, in the workplace or in schools or whatever, they don't understand the mental burden that trans people constantly have, particularly if we are in the process of transitioning, which is 5 years, you know, it takes to your body to adjust to hormones and, you know, allowing yourself to feel like you can express yourself properly or in a way that's comfortable with you. People don't understand that burden that is going on in your personal life, and you've got to, and you're turning up every day to work or school, and you're bringing that burden with you, and then you get some smart ass making a stupid comment, which, you know, they probably don't really think about.
I've got maybe half an hour to an hour of walking down the street like I own the place and grinning at all these people and going, yeah, come at me. And then there's a click that happens internally, and I am suddenly where Jasmine is, and I just don't want to be perceived. Can I just walk down the street and be invisible? And I don't even want people to look at me. So it's that difficult duality of it, I suppose, of like, yeah, I want to be out there and I want to be like this, I want to celebrate this, but also it is exhausting.
I've told like some boys that I'm trans, and then they get so confused and they think, oh, so you're transitioning to a boy. And I'm like, no, I'm other way around. You just, so it's a bit awkward, but no, funny
that's
moments.
Actually the most flattering thing that someone can say, right?
No, I'm like, oh, thank you. But then also, when you think about it, sometimes when people come up to me and say, oh, like, I couldn't even tell. It's like, what, like, thank you. Like, I secretly find it a compliment. Yeah. But it's also like, what is supposed to be a trans woman? Like, what is it? Are they supposed to be like, you know, stereotypical, like masculine?
Yeah,
and then they've got feminine.
Picturing?
Yeah, like what were you picturing? Like, you know,
a massive
definitely.
sign above the head being untrans.
Yeah. No, definitely.
With an arrow.
Yeah, all the arrows.
Yeah.